I said get out. You don't belong here. Brenda Whitmore, a 48-year-old woman in designer tennis whites and oversized sunglasses, stood with her phone pressed against her ear, her free hand jabbing accusingly at two children. Her face was flushed red with anger, her voice climbing higher with each word. Yes, 911? I need police at the Riverside Heights community pool immediately. Two individuals have broken into our private facility. They're being aggressive and they're threatening residents. We need someone here now. But here's what made this scene so shocking. The individuals she was talking about? They were 12-year-old twins. Marcus and Maya Henderson stood frozen near the pool's edge, their eyes wide with confusion and fear. Marcus clutched a laminated pool pass in his trembling hand, the same pass that had been issued to them legally, the same pass that proved they had every right to be there. Maya's eyes were beginning to fill with tears as she looked around at the growing crowd of adults, desperately trying to understand what they had done wrong. They had only wanted to swim. The sound of police sirens began to wail in the distance, growing louder with each passing second. Marcus's breathing became shallow and rapid. His hand instinctively went to the watch on his wrist, his late father's watch, as if touching it could somehow protect him from whatever was about to happen. Maya grabbed her brother's other hand and squeezed it tight. "Marcus, what did we do?" she whispered, her voice cracking. He couldn't answer her. He didn't know. Other pool-goers stood around them, some recording on their phones, others whispering to each other, a few looking away uncomfortably. No one stepped forward to help. The twins were alone in a crowd, two children being treated like criminals for the crime of existing in a space where someone decided they didn't belong. The sirens were getting closer now. Marcus could feel his heart pounding in his chest so hard it hurt. This couldn't be happening. They had followed every rule. They had their passes. They lived here. They belonged here. But Brenda Whitmore's voice continued to ring out, loud and insistent, painting them as threats, as intruders, as dangers to this quiet suburban community. And then, just as the first police cruiser pulled into the parking lot, something else happened. A black SUV with tinted windows came to a sudden stop near the pool entrance. The driver's door opened, and a woman stepped out. She was dressed in a professional navy pantsuit, her hair pulled back elegantly, a small golden pin on her lapel catching the sunlight. She moved with purpose, with authority, with the kind of presence that made people instinctively step aside. Brenda Whitmore was still talking rapidly into her phone, still gesturing at the children, still building her case to the 911 dispatcher. When she finally looked up and saw who had just arrived, the color drained from her face like water circling a drain. Because the woman walking toward those two terrified children, the woman now kneeling down to embrace them as they burst into tears of relief, the woman whose eyes were now turning toward Brenda with a look that could freeze fire. If you're already hooked by this story, make sure you hit that subscribe button right now, because what happens next will leave you absolutely speechless. This is a story about injustice, about courage, and about a moment that changed an entire community forever. You're not going to want to miss a single second of this. But to understand how we got to this moment, to understand why two innocent children ended up with police being called on them for simply trying to swim, we need to go back. We need to go back 30 minutes earlier, to when this day started like any other summer Saturday, full of hope and excitement and the simple joy of childhood. If you stand against injustice, type yes in the comments and share this video to others so they can learn too. Now, let me take you back to where this all began. 30 minutes earlier, in the Henderson family home, where two children were getting ready for what should have been one of the best days of their summer. 30 minutes earlier, the morning sun had just begun to climb over the tree-lined streets of Riverside Heights, Connecticut. This wasn't just any neighborhood. This was the kind of place that appeared in magazines with titles like Best Places to Raise a Family and America's Most Desirable Communities. Behind its pristine iron gates stood homes with manicured lawns, 3-car garages, and price tags that made most people's eyes water. The community had everything: tennis courts, walking trails, a state-of-the-art fitness center, and of course, that beautiful Olympic-sized swimming pool that was the crown jewel of the entire development. Riverside Heights prided itself on its progressive values. Rainbow flags appeared on porches during Pride Month. Yard signs proclaimed that, "In this house we believe in science, kindness, and equality." The Homeowners Association website boasted about their diverse, welcoming community where everyone belonged. It was the kind of place where people smiled at their neighbors, where children rode bikes freely through the streets, where everything looked perfect from the outside. But here's the thing about appearances: they can be deceiving. Because beneath that glossy, progressive surface, there were tensions that no one wanted to talk about. Whispered conversations at HOA meetings about maintaining property values and preserving the character of the neighborhood. Uncomfortable silences when certain families moved in. Side-eye glances at the grocery store. The kind of subtle prejudice that people could deny because it never announced itself loudly. It just hummed quietly in the background, invisible to those who didn't have to feel it, but unmistakable to those who did. And on this particular Saturday morning, those tensions were about to explode into the open in a way no one could ignore. Inside a beautiful colonial-style home on Maple Drive, number 247 to be exact, the Henderson family was starting their day. The kitchen smelled like fresh coffee and cinnamon toast. Sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating family photos on the walls, vacation pictures, school portraits, and prominently displayed a photograph of a handsome man in a firefighter's uniform, his smile wide and genuine, his arms wrapped around his wife and two young children. That man was David Henderson, and he had been gone for 3 years. Mayor Jennifer Henderson stood at the kitchen counter, already dressed in professional attire even though it was barely 8 in the morning. At 42 years old, she carried herself with the kind of quiet strength that came from surviving the unthinkable. Her hair was pulled back in a neat bun, her makeup subtle but polished, her pantsuit crisp and perfectly pressed. But if you looked closely, really looked, you could see the exhaustion around her eyes, the tension in her shoulders, the way her hand trembled slightly as she poured her 3rd cup of coffee that morning. She was the first Black mayor in Riverside's 150-year history. Elected 18 months ago on a platform of unity, transparency, and progress, she had promised to build bridges and serve everyone in the community. What she hadn't anticipated was just how heavy that responsibility would become, especially when half the city seemed determined to fight her at every turn. This morning was no different. Spread across the counter were notes for a town hall meeting scheduled for that evening. Another contentious discussion about affordable housing that she was pushing to develop on the outskirts of town. The opposition had been fierce and, at times, ugly. People who smiled at her in public would stand up at council meetings and talk about those kinds of people ruining their neighborhoods, about crime rates and declining property values, using every coded phrase they could find to express sentiments they couldn't say out loud. Jennifer took a deep breath and tried to focus on her notes, but her mind kept drifting. She was exhausted, she was lonely, and she was trying desperately to be everything to everyone: a competent mayor, a present mother, a role model for her community, while carrying the weight of grief that never quite went away. 3 years ago, her husband David had run into a burning elementary school to save children trapped on the 2nd floor. He had gotten 6 kids out safely before the floor collapsed beneath him. The city called him a hero. They named a park after him. They gave Jennifer a medal at a ceremony where she had to stand there and smile while her heart shattered into a million pieces. Her children had lost their father, she had lost her soulmate. And no amount of public recognition could fill that void. Moving to Riverside Heights 6 months ago had been an attempt at a fresh start. After David's death, everything in their old neighborhood reminded them of him. The fire station where he worked, the park where they had family picnics, the school where he volunteered as a coach. Jennifer wanted her children to have good schools, a safe community, and a chance to just be kids again, without the shadow of tragedy following them everywhere. But fresh starts, she was learning, were harder than they looked. Mom, are you listening?" Jennifer looked up to see her daughter Maya standing in front of her, hands on her hips, a huge grin on her face. Maya Henderson was 12 years old, all energy and confidence and dreams bigger than the sky. She wanted to be a lawyer, just like her mom had been before going into politics. She had her father's smile, that same infectious joy that could light up a room. Her hair was pulled back in 2 puffs and she was already wearing her swimsuit under a cover-up, ready for the pool. "Sorry, baby," Jennifer said, setting down her coffee. "What did you say?" I said, "Did you know that the Riverside pool has diving boards that go up to 10 meters? 10 meters, Mom. That's like jumping off a 3-story building. Marcus says I'm not allowed to try it, but I think he's just scared because—" "I am not scared," came a voice from the doorway. Marcus Henderson walked into the kitchen, his nose buried in a book about constellations. Where Maya was all outward energy, Marcus was quiet intensity. He was thoughtful, careful, a kid who noticed everything and felt everything deeply. He wore his father's old watch on his wrist, way too big for him, but he refused to take it off. It was like keeping a piece of his dad with him always. Marcus had struggled the most after David's death. The anxiety that had always been there in small doses had grown into something bigger. Panic attacks before school, trouble sleeping, a constant worry that something bad was about to happen. Therapy was helping, but Jennifer could still see how much effort it took for him to navigate the world when his brain kept telling him that danger lurked around every corner. "You're scared of everything," Maya teased, poking her brother's shoulder. "I'm cautious," Marcus corrected, not looking up from his book. "There's a difference. Did you know that Orion's belt is actually not 3 stars but—" Okay, astronomy boy," Maya laughed. "Save it for your nerd club. It's called the Junior Astronomy Society, and it's not nerdy, it's—" "Kids," Jennifer interrupted gently, smiling despite her exhaustion. This was normal. This was what she wanted for them. Sibling banter, excitement about summer activities, the ordinary rhythms of childhood. "Are you both ready for the pool?" "Yes," Maya practically shouted. "We've been waiting 6 months to use it." It was true. When Jennifer had bought the house in Riverside Heights, the community pool had been one of the major selling points. After everything they had been through, she wanted to give her children something to look forward to, a place where they could have fun and make friends and just be 12-year-olds without the weight of the world on their shoulders. Marcus looked up from his book, and Jennifer saw a flicker of nervousness in his eyes. "Mom, are you sure it's okay? I mean, we have our passes and everything, but what if—" "What if nothing?" Jennifer said firmly, walking over to cup his face in her hands. "You belong there just as much as anyone else. You're residents. You have every right to use that pool. Do you understand me?" Marcus nodded, but the worry didn't quite leave his eyes. Jennifer pulled both her children into a hug, breathing in the smell of chlorine-ready skin and sunscreen and that particular kid scent that she wished she could bottle up and keep forever. "I am so sorry I can't come with you today. I have this budget meeting at 10, then the planning commission at noon, and then I have to prep for tonight's town hall. But I promise, I will try my absolute hardest to meet you there by 3 o'clock. Okay?" "It's okay, Mom," Maya said, though Jennifer could hear the disappointment. "We know you're busy saving the world and stuff." "Not the world," Jennifer said softly, "just trying to make our little corner of it a little bit better." She made them promise to text her when they arrived, to follow all the pool rules, to look out for each other, to be respectful to everyone they met. Marcus promised approximately 7 times. Maya rolled her eyes but hugged her mom tight. As Jennifer watched them gather their pool bags, towels, sunscreen, snacks, Marcus's astronomy book, because of course he was bringing a book, she felt that familiar tug of guilt that every working mother knows. The guilt of not being there enough, of missing moments, of asking her children to understand that the world needed her attention when all she wanted was to spend the day with them. "I love you both more than anything in this universe," she called as they headed toward the garage where their bikes were stored. "Love you too, Mom," they called back in unison. And then they were gone, pedaling off toward what should have been a perfect summer day. But Jennifer couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that settled in her chest as she returned to her speech notes. Maybe it was maternal instinct. Maybe it was just the exhaustion talking. Or maybe it was the reality of being a black mother in America, where you could never quite let your guard down, where you always had to worry just a little bit more where the simple act of sending your children to a swimming pool required a mental checklist of everything that could go wrong. She pushed the feeling aside and tried to focus on her work. Meanwhile, just 3 streets over, another woman was starting her morning with very different thoughts on her mind. Brenda Whitmore stood in her immaculate kitchen, all marble countertops and stainless steel appliances, scrolling through her phone with increasing irritation. At 48 years old, Brenda had lived in Riverside Heights for 15 years. She knew everyone, attended every HOA meeting, and served as vice president of the Homeowners Association with the kind of dedication that bordered on obsession. Being a real estate agent, she had helped at least a dozen families find homes in this community. She prided herself on maintaining standards, on keeping Riverside Heights the kind of place where people wanted to live. But lately, she had been feeling like everything was slipping away. New families were moving in, families who didn't fit her idea of what Riverside Heights should be. The city council, under that new mayor, was pushing policies that Brenda was certain would ruin everything they had built. Affordable housing nearby, inclusionary zoning, these were threats to property values, threats to safety, threats to the very character of the community. At least, that's what Brenda told herself. That's what she told anyone who would listen at HOA meetings, at city council sessions, in whispered conversations with neighbors who nodded along because it was easier than challenging her. Brenda would have been offended if anyone called her racist. She would have pointed to the fact that she had worked with diverse clients in her real estate business, that she had donated to charity, that she considered herself a good person. But the truth she would never admit even to herself, was that her discomfort had less to do with economics and everything to do with who was moving into her neighborhood. She had noticed the Henderson family when they moved in 6 months ago. The mayor herself, buying property in Riverside Heights. Brenda had watched from her window as moving trucks unloaded furniture. As those 2 children rode their bikes through the streets, as Jennifer Henderson waved politely at neighbors. And Brenda had made it her business to keep an eye on them. This morning she was preparing for her usual Saturday routine, tennis at 9, then pool time, then an afternoon reviewing HOA violation reports. Yes, violation reports. Brenda took her role seriously. Too seriously, according to her ex-husband Doug. But what did he know? He had given up on this community, given up on their marriage, moved into a condo on the other side of the development with that girlfriend of his, Amanda, who was at least 15 years younger and clearly just interested in his money. Brenda pushed thoughts of Doug aside and focused on her clipboard. She had plans to survey the pool area today, to make sure everyone using it was properly registered, to ensure that standards were being maintained. She had no idea that her obsession with rules and standards was about to blow up in her face in the most public way possible. Across town at the Riverside Police Department, Officers Ryan Mitchell and Sarah Banks were starting their Saturday shift. Mitchell, 35 years old, was a by-the-book cop who had worked in Riverside for 8 years. He was professional, calm, and increasingly uncomfortable with the number of calls they were getting from wealthy neighborhoods about suspicious persons who turned out to be residents just living their lives. His partner, Sarah Banks, was 29 and one of the few black officers on the Riverside force. She had chosen this career to make a difference, to be part of the solution, but lately, she was feeling the weight of every call, where she had to show up and explain to people who looked like her that someone had decided they were a threat for simply existing in a space. Neither of them knew it yet, but they were about to respond to a call that would test everything they believed about justice, duty, and doing the right thing. And back at Riverside Heights, Patricia Chen, the HOA president, was enjoying her morning coffee and dreading the inevitable phone call from Brenda about whatever minor violation had captured her attention that week. Patricia was 45, diplomatic to a fault, and exhausted from trying to keep peace in a community that seemed determined to fight about everything. She tried to be fair, tried to listen to all sides, but she knew she had enabled Brenda's behavior too many times by just letting things slide to avoid conflict. Today, that would change. All of these people, Jennifer Henderson, Marcus and Maya, Brenda Whitmore, Doug, Patricia, officers Mitchell and Banks, were going about their Saturday morning with no idea that their lives were about to intersect in a moment that would force every single one of them to choose who they really were. Because in less than 30 minutes, two 12-year-old children would arrive at a swimming pool with valid passes and innocent hearts full of excitement for summer fun. And someone would decide that they didn't belong there. Someone would decide that the color of their skin made them suspicious. Someone would call the police, and nothing in Riverside Heights would ever be the same again. Before we continue with what happens when Marcus and Maya arrive at that pool, I need you to hit that subscribe button right now, because this story is about to take a turn that will make your blood boil and your heart break. This is real life, and you need to see how it unfolds. Now let's go back to Marcus and Maya Henderson, pedaling their bikes toward the community pool, laughing and excited, completely unaware that the next hour of their lives was about to become a nightmare they would never forget. Marcus and Maya Henderson pedaled their bikes through the tree-lined streets of Riverside Heights, the morning sun warming their backs. Maya chattered excitedly about practicing her butterfly stroke, while Marcus listened quietly, a small smile on his face. When they reached the pool entrance, Marcus pulled out his key fob and held it up to the electronic reader. The light turned green. The gate clicked open. They were in. The pool area was beautiful. Sparkling blue water, lounge chairs in neat rows, perfectly maintained landscaping. A few families were already there, and Marcus felt his anxiety spike as he noticed all the eyes that might judge them. His hand instinctively went to his father's watch on his wrist, spinning it around like he always did when nervous. "Come on," Maya whispered, grabbing his hand. "We belong here. Mom said so." They found two empty lounge chairs and set down their bags. That's when they heard a warm voice call out, "Well, hello there, are you the Henderson children?" An older Latina woman walked toward them with a genuine smile. She was in her late 60s with kind eyes and silver hair pulled back in a bun. "I'm Eleanor Rodriguez. I live just down the street from you on Maple Drive. I brought cookies to your house when you moved in. Chocolate chip with sea salt." "I remember those," Maya said, her face lighting up. "They were amazing." Mrs. Rodriguez beamed. "Your mother has told me so much about you both. She's such a wonderful woman. This city is so lucky to have her as mayor. Is this your first time at the pool?" "Yes, ma'am," Marcus replied quietly. "Well, you're going to love it. And Maya, your mother mentioned you're quite the swimmer." Maya grinned. "You definitely will get to see." That simple kindness made all the difference. Maya dove into the pool with a joyful splash, and Marcus settled into his chair with his astronomy book. For 20 minutes, everything was perfect. Marcus read about stars, Maya cut through the water with impressive speed, and for the first time in a long time, they felt like normal kids having a normal summer day. And then Brenda Whitmore arrived. She came through the gate like she owned the place. Designer tennis whites, oversized sunglasses, clipboard tucked under one arm. Brenda surveyed the pool area with the scrutiny of a general inspecting troops. Then her gaze landed on Marcus and Maya. Her steps slowed. Her eyes narrowed. She didn't recognize these children, and in 15 years of living in Riverside Heights, Brenda had made it her business to know everyone who had the right to use these facilities. Brenda walked over to Mrs. Rodriguez and sat down, leaning in close. "Eleanor," she said in what she thought was a whisper but was actually quite loud, "who are those children?" Mrs. Rodriguez looked up from her book. "Oh, that's Marcus and Maya Henderson. They live on our street. The mayor's children. Lovely kids." Brenda's jaw tightened. "I don't recall seeing them at the new resident orientation, and I definitely don't remember approving their pool passes." Mrs. Rodriguez raised an eyebrow. "Brenda, you don't personally approve every pool pass. Patricia handles that. They're residents. Why wouldn't they have passes?" But Brenda was already standing up, walking with purpose toward the twins. Marcus saw her coming first. Something about the way this woman moved made his anxiety spike immediately. He closed his book and sat up straighter, his hand going to his father's watch. "Well, hello there," Brenda said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "I don't think we've met. I'm Brenda Whitmore, Vice President of the Riverside Heights Homeowners Association." She said it like announcing royalty. "Hi," Maya said politely. "I'm Maya and this is my brother Marcus." "How nice. And are you visiting someone here today? Which family are you with?" Maya's eyebrows furrowed. "We're not visiting. We live here." "Oh?" Brenda's tone suggested she didn't believe this. "You live here? In Riverside Heights?" "Yes, ma'am," Marcus said quietly, his heart beating faster. "We live on Maple Drive, number 247. Brenda's eyes flickered with recognition, but she didn't back down. "I see. And does your mother know you're here? At the pool? Unsupervised?" The twins exchanged confused glances. They were 12. Lots of kids their age were at the pool without parents. "Yes, ma'am," Maya said, her voice taking on a slight edge. "She knows we're here." Well, I'm going to need to see your pool passes. All residents must have valid passes to use the facility." Marcus's hands trembled as he pulled out his laminated pass. Maya did the same. Brenda snatched them up like collecting evidence at a crime scene. She examined them with intense scrutiny, checking every detail. The passes had everything required: names, address, photos, the official logo. Completely legitimate. But Brenda wasn't satisfied. "These don't have the HOA stamp," she announced triumphantly. Marcus blinked in confusion. "The what stamp?" "The official HOA stamp. Patricia is supposed to stamp all new passes. These haven't been stamped." "But we just got them last week," Maya explained. "The HOA office said they were ready to use." "Well, they're not properly processed. I'm going to need you two to stay out of the pool while I make some calls." Maya's mouth dropped open. "What? But we just out of the pool. Now, until this is sorted out." Other pool goers started noticing. Conversations quieted. Eyes turned. Some people pulled out their phones to record. Brenda called Patricia, putting it on speaker. After Patricia confirmed the passes were completely valid and properly processed, Brenda's face flushed red. She had been contradicted in front of witnesses. "I still have concerns about these passes," she announced loudly. "This is a private community facility, and we have rules." "But the HOA president just said our passes are valid," Maya said, frustration rising in her voice. "Don't you raise your voice at me, young lady," Brenda snapped. "She wasn't raising her voice," Marcus said, stepping closer to his sister, his own voice shaking. "She was just explaining. I will not be spoken to disrespectfully by children. This is exactly the kind of behavior that concerns me." Mrs. Rodriguez stood up. "Brenda, this is ridiculous. These children have done nothing wrong." A man's voice cut through the tension. "Brenda, what the hell are you doing?" Doug Whitmore walked through the gate with his girlfriend Amanda. He looked at the scene, his ex-wife standing over two scared children, and his heart sank. "Doug, stay out of this," Brenda said sharply. "You're harassing kids," Doug said. "What is wrong with you? These children don't have proper authorization. They have passes. Patricia told you they're valid. What more do you want?" Being challenged by her ex-husband in front of an audience was more than Brenda could handle. When people like Brenda feel cornered, they double down. "I have every right to verify that people using this facility are authorized," she said loudly. "I'm responsible for community safety." "Community safety?" Doug repeated angrily. "They're 12 years old with valid passes. Admit what this is really about, Brenda." The silence that followed was deafening. Everyone knew what Doug meant. Maya's eyes filled with tears. "We just wanted to swim. We didn't do anything bad." Marcus stood up straighter and looked directly at Brenda. "You need to stop treating us like this. We have every right to be here." That simple act of a 12-year-old boy standing up for himself was what pushed Brenda over the edge. "That's it," she said, voice shaking with anger. "These children are being disrespectful and threatening. I'm calling the police." Mrs. Rodriguez gasped. "Brenda, no." But Brenda was already dialing 911. When the dispatcher answered, she spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. "Yes, I need police at the Riverside Heights community pool immediately. 2 individuals have broken into our private pool facility. They don't have proper authorization, and when I tried to ask them to leave, they became aggressive and threatening. We need officers here right away." Marcus felt the world spin. His hands began shaking uncontrollably. His breath came in short gasps. He remembered the talk his mom had given them about police, about keeping hands visible, being extra polite, not making sudden movements. He remembered how his mom's voice had shaken and how she had cried afterward. Maya grabbed her brother's hand and held it tight, crying openly now. "Marcus, what did we do? What did we do wrong?" He couldn't answer, because they hadn't done anything wrong. They had followed every rule. They had been polite. They had shown their passes. But it didn't matter. The sound of sirens began to wail in the distance, growing louder with each passing second. Mrs. Rodriguez moved to stand beside the twins, placing a protective hand on Maya's shoulder. "You two haven't done anything wrong. Do you hear me?" "Nothing." Marcus's breathing was getting worse. A full panic attack. Maya held his hand tighter, whispering, "It's okay," even though nothing was okay. Brenda stood with her arms crossed, face set in vindication. She had no idea that in less than 10 minutes, she would come face to face with the mayor of the entire city. She had no idea her actions were about to be broadcast to the entire nation. All she knew was that she had called the police on 2 black children for trying to swim. And she felt completely justified. If this story is making your blood boil, you need to subscribe right now. Because what happens when Mayor Henderson arrives is something you cannot miss. But let me ask you, have you ever been treated unfairly? Did you speak up? Or did you stay silent? Now let's continue with what happened when Officers Ryan Mitchell and Sarah Banks pulled into that parking lot, when these 2 terrified children had to face the police for doing absolutely nothing wrong. The police cruiser pulled into the Riverside Heights pool parking lot, and Officers Ryan Mitchell and Sarah Banks stepped out into a scene that immediately made Banks's stomach drop. She'd been a cop for 5 years, and she knew this situation the moment she saw it. 2 black children standing together, terrified, while a white woman in tennis clothes gestured dramatically, pointing at them like they were dangerous criminals. Marcus was visibly shaking, his whole body trembling as he stood next to his sister. Maya was fighting back tears, her jaw clenched tight, trying so hard to be brave. They held hands like lifelines, 2 12-year-olds who had done nothing but try to swim. Before the officers could even assess the situation, Brenda Whitmore rushed toward them, her voice loud and insistent. "Officers, thank God you're here. These 2 broke into our private pool facility. They claim to have passes, but they're not properly authorized. When I questioned them about their right to be here, they became aggressive and disrespectful. I'm the vice president of the HOA, and I need them removed from the premises immediately." Officer Banks looked from Brenda to the twins. She saw what Brenda apparently couldn't see, or chose not to see. These weren't aggressive threats. These were scared children. Marcus's hands were shaking so badly he could barely hold still. Maya's eyes were red from crying. Their body language screamed fear, not aggression. Banks had been in situations like this before, too many times, and every single time, it broke something inside her. Officer Mitchell approached the twins calmly, his voice measured and professional. "Hey there. I'm Officer Mitchell, and this is Officer Banks. Can you tell me your names?" Marcus tried to speak, but his voice came out as barely a whisper. "Marcus Henderson. This is my sister Maya." "Okay, Marcus and Maya, do you have any identification or passes that show you're allowed to be here?" With trembling hands, Marcus pulled out both passes and handed them to Mitchell. The officer examined them carefully. Laminated cards with the twins' names, their address at 247 Maple Drive, their photos, and the official Riverside Heights logo. They looked completely legitimate. Mitchell looked up at Brenda. "Ma'am, these passes appear valid. What exactly is the problem?" Brenda stepped forward, her clipboard held like a shield. "Those passes don't have the proper HOA stamp. The protocol wasn't followed correctly. As Vice President of the Homeowners Association, I have the authority to verify access to our facilities, and something about this situation doesn't sit right with me." Officer Banks felt her jaw tighten. "Ma'am, the passes have all the required information, names, address, photos. What specifically makes them invalid?" "The stamp. Is the stamp legally required?" Banks pressed. Brenda hesitated. "Well, it's HOA policy. But is it required for the passes to be valid?" The silence that followed was telling. Doug Whitmore stepped forward, unable to stay silent any longer. "Officers, I'm a resident here. These kids have done absolutely nothing wrong. Their passes are legitimate. This is about—" He stopped himself, the words catching in his throat, but everyone knew what he almost said. Brenda whirled on him. Don't you dare, Doug. This is about community standards and proper authorization, nothing more. Is it? Doug challenged. Because I've lived here 15 years, and I've never once seen you interrogate white children about their passes. The crowd that had gathered went silent. Someone had finally said it out loud. Officer Banks knelt down to the twins' eye level, her voice gentle. Marcus, Maya, have you two broken any rules here today? Did you do anything wrong? Maya's tears finally spilled over. No, ma'am. We just wanted to swim. We have our passes. We live here. We didn't do anything. Her voice broke on the last word. Marcus added quietly. We followed all the rules. We don't understand why she called the police on us. Banks felt her heart crack. She saw herself in these children. Every time she'd been followed in a store, questioned in her own neighborhood, treated like she didn't belong in spaces where she had every right to be. Officer Mitchell stepped aside to his patrol car to verify the address. Banks stayed with the twins, speaking quietly. You're not in trouble, okay? We just need to verify some information, but you haven't done anything wrong. Brenda crossed her arms, a look of vindication on her face. To her, the presence of police proved she had been right to call them. Doug stood nearby, his face a mixture of anger and shame. Shame that he had once been married to this woman. Shame that he hadn't spoken up sooner. Shame for every time he'd stayed silent when he should have acted. The crowd was clearly divided. Some residents nodded along with Brenda, muttering about rules and proper procedures and the importance of security. Others looked horrified, uncomfortable, unable to meet the twins' eyes. A few recorded on their phones, capturing every moment of this injustice. Mrs. Rodriguez sat down on the curb next to Marcus and Maya, putting a protective arm around Maya's shoulders. You two are not alone, she whispered. What's happening to you is wrong, and I'm going to make sure everyone knows it. Marcus pulled out his phone with shaking hands, staring at the screen. He knew his mom had meetings all day. Important meetings. He didn't want to bother her. But he was so scared, and he didn't know what to do. Officer Mitchell returned from his patrol car and addressed the group. The address checks out. 247 Maple Drive is registered to Jennifer Henderson. The passes are legitimate. There's no violation here. You would think that would be the end of it. But Brenda Whitmore wasn't done. I want to speak to their mother, she demanded. These children are here unsupervised. They should have adult supervision. Officer Banks straightened up, her professional patience wearing thin. Ma'am, they're 12 years old. There are multiple children here around the same age without direct parental supervision. That's not unusual or illegal. In this community, we expect. Ma'am, Banks interrupted, her voice firm now. These children have not broken any laws. They have not violated any rules. Their passes are valid. We're done here. Brenda's face flushed red with anger and embarrassment. I'm filing a formal complaint. I know the police chief personally, and he will hear about how I've been treated today. That's your right, Mitchell said evenly. But there's no legal issue here. As the officers prepared to leave, Brenda played her final card, her voice rising loud enough for everyone to hear. Fine. If the police won't do anything, I'm calling an emergency HOA board meeting. These passes will be revoked for security concerns. This community has standards, and we have every right to protect our property values and our safety. That's when Marcus Henderson, quiet, anxious Marcus who had been trying so hard to hold it together, finally broke. Why do you hate us? He cried out, his voice cracking with pain and confusion. We didn't do anything to you. We just wanted to swim. Why do you hate us so much? Maya was sobbing openly now. You called the cops on us for swimming. For swimming? What did we do wrong? Just tell us what we did wrong. The raw pain in their voices cut through the air like a knife. Some people in the crowd looked away, ashamed. Others pulled out their phones, making sure they captured this moment. A few wiped away tears of their own. Brenda opened her mouth to respond, to justify herself, to explain that this wasn't personal, that this was about rules and standards and community safety. And that's when they all heard it. The sound of a vehicle moving fast, tires squealing slightly as it turned into the parking lot. A black SUV with tinted windows came to an abrupt stop near the pool entrance. The engine cut off. The driver's door opened, and Mayor Jennifer Henderson stepped out. She was still in her professional attire from City Hall, a navy pantsuit, her hair pulled back, her mayor's pin catching the sunlight. But her face showed the fury of a mother who had just received a terrified text from her child saying the police had been called on them. Brenda Whitmore turned to see who had arrived, and the color drained from her face like someone had pulled a plug. Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out, because standing in front of her, walking with purpose toward those two crying children, was not just the mayor of Riverside. She was the mother of the children Brenda had just called the police on. She was a woman who had buried her hero husband and rebuilt her life through sheer force of will. She was a mother whose children had just been traumatized for the crime of being black at a swimming pool. And Brenda Whitmore had just made the biggest mistake of her life. If you want to see what happens when a mother's fury meets a woman's reckoning, you need to subscribe to this channel right now, because what comes next is the most powerful confrontation you will ever witness. This is the moment everything changes. Let me ask you this. If you were Mayor Henderson in this moment, what would you do? How do you handle a situation where your children have been traumatized, where justice demands action, but you also have to represent an entire city? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Now, let's watch as Mayor Jennifer Henderson walks toward her children, toward the woman who called the police on them, toward a moment that will define what kind of community Riverside Heights really wants to be. Mayor Jennifer Henderson didn't walk. She moved with the force of a mother's protective fury and a leader's authority combined. Her assistant Rachel and a security detail followed close behind, but Jennifer's eyes were locked on only one thing: her children sitting on that curb, crying, humiliated, traumatized. She had been in the middle of a critical budget meeting when Marcus's text came through. Just 3 words that made her blood run cold. "Mom, police here." She hadn't asked permission to leave. She hadn't waited for explanations. She had grabbed her things and run. Now seeing Marcus shaking uncontrollably and Maya's tear-stained face, seeing the police officers, seeing the crowd of people who had watched her children be terrorized, something fierce and unstoppable rose up inside her. Jennifer walked straight to her children and dropped to her knees on the concrete, not caring about her expensive pantsuit. "Are you okay? Did anyone hurt you?" Her voice was gentle with them, but her eyes were already scanning the scene, taking in every detail, recognizing faces from city council meetings. Both twins threw themselves into their mother's arms, and the sobs that came out of them were the kind that only come when you finally feel safe after being terrified. Jennifer held them tight, one hand on each child's head, whispering, I'm here, you're safe now." When she stood up, she was no longer just a mother. She was the mayor of Riverside, and every person there could feel this shift in energy. "I'm Mayor Jennifer Henderson," she said, her voice carrying across the entire pool area as she turned to Officers Mitchell and Banks. "These are my children. Can someone please explain to me why police were called to harass them at a pool they have every legal right to use?" Officer Banks, respectful but visibly uncomfortable, stepped forward. "Mayor Henderson, we responded to a 911 call. We verified your children's residency and their passes. Everything is legitimate. They haven't done anything wrong. We were actually just about to leave." Jennifer's eyes swept the crowd. Who made the call? Every single person there turned to look at Brenda Whitmore, and in that moment, Brenda's face went from red to white as the full weight of what she'd done crashed down on her. She had called the police on the mayor's children. The mayor, the first black mayor in the city's history. This wasn't just bad, this was catastrophic. Brenda's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. "Mayor Henderson, this is just a misunderstanding. I was simply following security protocol. As HOA vice president, I have a responsibility to verify." "Stop," Jennifer said, her voice quiet but absolute. "Just stop." She pulled out her phone and turned it so everyone could see the screen. "I've already obtained the 911 recording. You want to hear what you told the dispatcher? You described my 12-year-old children as aggressive threats who broke into the pool. You said they were threatening residents. My children, 12 years old, with valid passes." Doug stepped forward, his voice heavy with shame. "Brenda, just apologize. For once in your life, just admit you were wrong." But Brenda couldn't do it. Instead, she deflected. If Patricia had processed the passes correctly with the proper stamp, Patricia Chen, who had just arrived, cut her off immediately. I processed those passes personally, Brenda. Everything was done correctly. Stop blaming others for your actions. Backed into a corner, Brenda tried a different approach, her voice taking on that particular tone of someone who thinks they're making a reasonable point. Mayor Henderson, you have to understand, there's been a lot of tension in this community lately. Your policies on affordable housing, the changes you're pushing that could attract certain types of people to areas near our neighborhood, property values, safety concerns. People are worried about. Finish that sentence. Jennifer said quietly, but there was steel underneath. Go ahead. Tell me what types of people you're worried about. The silence was deafening. Brenda's mouth worked, but no sound came out, because they both knew, everyone knew, exactly what she meant. Jennifer's voice remained calm, but every word hit like a hammer. 3 years ago, my husband David ran into a burning elementary school. He saved 6 children before the floor collapsed and killed him. The city called him a hero. They gave me a medal at a ceremony where I had to smile while my heart was breaking. My children lost their father. I lost my soulmate. Her voice cracked slightly, but she pushed on. I moved my family to this community because I wanted them to have stability. Good schools. A safe place to heal. A pool where they could just be children. But you saw 2 black children, and your first instinct wasn't to welcome them. It was to interrogate them, to doubt them, to call the police on them. Marcus and Maya stood behind their mother, still crying, holding each other's hands. Jennifer continued, her voice stronger now. My son has anxiety. He has panic attacks. My daughter has nightmares. They've been through trauma that no child should experience. And now you've added to that trauma by treating them like criminals for the crime of trying to swim in their own community pool. Mrs. Rodriguez spoke up, her voice shaking with emotion. Jennifer is right. I watched the whole thing. Those children did nothing wrong. Nothing. Doug added, I'm ashamed I was ever married someone who could do this. Ashamed I didn't speak up sooner. Brenda's face was bright red now, her voice rising defensively. I don't have to stand here and be bullied. I have rights too. Just because you're the mayor doesn't mean you can attack me in front of everyone. I was following the rules, trying to protect this community, and now you're making me out to be some kind of villain. You called the police on children for swimming, Jennifer said simply. You made yourself the villain. Rachel approached Jennifer and quietly showed her a tablet. Jennifer glanced at it and nodded. She addressed the crowd. This incident is already on social media. Multiple videos from different angles. The whole country is watching what happened here today. The young white mother in the crowd stepped forward. Tears in her eyes. Mayor Henderson, I'm so sorry. I watched this happen and I didn't speak up. I should have helped your children. I'm ashamed of myself. Another resident called out, this isn't the community I want my kids growing up in. This has to change. But others remained silent, uncomfortable but unwilling to take a side, not wanting to get involved. Brenda, feeling attacked from all directions, lashed out. Fine, you want me gone? I'll resign from the HOA? Is that what you want? You've all turned against me, made me the villain of your little social justice story. I hope you're happy. Jennifer's voice remained calm. Ms. Whitmore, this isn't about destroying you. This isn't about revenge. This is about my children's right to exist in their own community without being treated as threats. This is about making sure no other child has to experience what mine experienced today. If you can't understand that, then yes, stepping down is probably best. Patricia spoke up. The HOA board needs to meet immediately. We need implicit bias training for all leadership. We need clear policies to prevent this from ever happening again. Brenda exploded. I am not taking any bias training. There's nothing wrong with protecting property values and community standards. I refuse to. Then you're done, Patricia said firmly. Your resignation is accepted. Jennifer gathered her children close. Come on, babies. Let's go home. As they walked toward the parking lot, Jennifer turned back one last time to address the crowd. To everyone here, this is bigger than one incident. This is about black and brown families and communities across this country who are constantly questioned, constantly doubted, constantly treated as if they don't belong in spaces they have every right to occupy. We can do better. We have to do better, because our children are watching, and they deserve better. The crowd stood in stunned silence as Mayor Henderson drove away with her traumatized children, leaving behind a community that would never be quite the same. Subscribe right now, because what happens next, the aftermath of this incident, how it changes the entire community, and whether real change actually happens, is something you need to see. Here's my question for you. Jennifer chose to take the high road and leave with dignity, rather than continue the confrontation. Would you have done the same, or would you have demanded more immediate consequences? Let me know in the comments. Now let's see what happened in the days and weeks that followed, because this story doesn't end at the pool. It's only just beginning. That evening, the Henderson home was quiet except for the sound of soft crying. Jennifer had made dinner, but no one had much appetite. They sat together in the living room, and finally Marcus spoke, his voice small and broken. "Mom, can we move somewhere else? I thought this place would be different. I thought we'd be safe here." Jennifer felt her heart shatter all over again. She sat between her children and pulled them close. "I wish I could promise you'll always be safe. I wish I could protect you from every Brenda Whitmore in this world. But I can't. What I can tell you is this. What happened today wasn't your fault. Do you hear me? You did nothing wrong." "Then why does it feel like we did?" Marcus whispered. Jennifer's voice was thick with tears. "Because that's exactly what people like her want you to feel. They want you to question whether you belong, whether you deserve to take up space in this world. But you are brilliant, you are kind, you are strong. And your father," her voice broke, "your father would be so incredibly proud of how you handled today." They cried together, the three of them holding each other in the home they'd chosen for a fresh start. A home that suddenly felt less safe than it had that morning. 1 week later, Riverside Heights HOA held an emergency meeting. News vans lined the streets outside. The incident had gone viral. Mayor's kids harassed at pool was a national story. Inside the packed community center, Patricia Chen stood at the podium. "We're here tonight to ensure what happened to the Henderson children never happens again," she announced. "Brenda Whitmore has resigned from the board. Her real estate office has also terminated her employment." Brenda wasn't there. She had gone into hiding after the videos went viral, after her face became synonymous with the exact kind of racism people always claimed didn't exist in nice suburban communities. Doug Whitmore stood to speak, his voice shaking. "I lived with Brenda for 15 years. I watched her behavior, and too many times, I stayed silent because it was easier than confronting her. I'm ashamed of that, but staying silent makes you complicit. That ends now. We all have to do better." The community voted on new measures: mandatory implicit bias training for all HOA leadership, clear anti-harassment protocols, a diversity and inclusion committee, and a formal written apology to the Henderson family. Mrs. Rodriguez stood. "We need to be a community our children can be proud of. A community where every child, black, white, brown, any child, can use the pool without fear." The measures passed, though not unanimously. Some residents voted no, uncomfortable with what they saw as political correctness. Change is slow, and it's never universal. 2 months later, on a warm Saturday morning, the Henderson family stood at the pool gate again. Marcus and Maya hesitated, the trauma of that day still fresh. "We don't have to do this today," Jennifer said softly. Maya took a deep breath. "No. This is our pool too." They walked in together. Mrs. Rodriguez was there, her face lighting up when she saw them. "Welcome back," she called warmly. Doug and Amanda came over to greet them with genuine smiles. There were still some uncomfortable stares from residents who hadn't quite figured out how to process what had happened, but there were more warm welcomes than cold shoulders. Maya pulled off her cover-up and walked to the pool's edge. For just a moment, she hesitated. Then she dove in, her body cutting through the water with that same impressive speed and grace. She was swimming, free, taking back the space that should have always been hers. Marcus settled into a lounge chair with his astronomy book, occasionally glancing at his father's watch on his wrist. Jennifer sat with a group of parents, talking about normal things: school registration, summer camps, the weather. Normal conversation in a community that was imperfectly, slowly, trying to be better. As Jennifer watched her children, Marcus reading peacefully, Maya swimming joyfully, she thought about how far they'd come. If this story moved you, if it made you think, if it challenged you to consider who you would be in a moment like this, subscribe to this channel because stories like this matter.